offense plays at such a high level. You've got a lot of X factors here with a lot of former players. That's a unique kind of coincidence there with Cribbs and T. Rich and DeQuell and Adams. You got a lot of combustible elements, Hoyer, and that. You know what? Before we even talk about the Colts, you and I talked Tuesday. You thought for sure they were going with the kid this week. Now, seeing how the week's played out, it's Brian Hoyer coming back. Just what is your take on the decision that was made by Mike Pettines?
Well, I see why he does that. He does things very slowly, very deliberately. He doesn't really rush into anything. It's pretty much what we saw at the beginning of the year when they were deciding who would be the starter at the beginning of the season. And he went with the more established, the veteran, someone who has more of a track record because, I guess that makes sense because, you can always put in the young guy later. You want to give your veteran as many chances as possible. I was in favor of starting Manziel, but I kind of see where he's coming from, and I think that Hoyer's the kind of guy who will respond to this pretty well. I was kind of down him early in the week. I thought, well, he's just going to go out and throw 3 takes again. But I think that there's a chance, there's a chance that he might respond to this well. I'm not saying he's definitely going to win, but he's the kind of guy who could make this situation work for him.
And I'll tell you, you heard what I said. Probably, I know you were listening along earlier in the show. Everybody knows I do. I'm on record. I'm not just on record. I put my money where my faith is in Brian Hoyer. In one of my DraftKings leagues this week, I went with Brian Hoyer as my guy over every other quarterback out there. And some of you may go, "Ha, that's what you get on Monday." But if I'm $40,000 richer, I'm buying a Mr. Hero, and you can't have none.
That's right.
No, I mean, I'm going to buy me a franchise. I'm going to actually go buy the Mr. Hero down at the end of my street, and I'm going to buy a franchise just so I can put that poster up on the wall. No, but that I hear you, and I know you were going the other way. That's why I wanted to ask you your thoughts on that. Either way, whoever the quarterback is, as we said, the one on the other side, I jokingly refer to my fantasy football because I've got Andrew Luck, but he is everything that he's said to be. He truly is a franchise prototype quarterback, and he's having another absolutely phenomenal season. It doesn't take a special scouting report to know that. 4,000 yards already, 34 touchdown passes for Andrew Luck.
Well, this is a guy that's really spoiled everybody on how good a young quarterback can be. I mean, once he came out, and of course, RG3 and Russell Wilson in 2012, everyone thought, wow, we can get a young quarterback. You can hop right in there and take it to the playoffs. Where obviously you've got there's a lot more factors. You have to have a lot of good players around him in order to make that work. But, he's just very special in that, they knew coming out of college he would be that way. That's why there was really no doubt that he would be the number one guy because of not only his arm, but his intelligence, and also the fact that he played in a really good pro-style system at Stanford. And he was able to just totally hit the ground running. And you see now that he's got, in his third year in the league, he's really getting it locked in. And the Colts have done a very good job of providing him with almost an overabundance of weapons to throw to.
Absolutely. I mean, you know what? I'm sure you're going to start going through that now. Some of these names are ones that you may not have heard of, some very familiar. I got to tell you, I don't know where you've got him figured in your scouting report, but, for all the focus on Trent Richardson, and he's, as I said the other day, I don't think the Browns necessarily need to worry that he's going to be jumping into the dog pound anytime soon. He threatened to if he scores, but, that being said, how about Boom Herron over there beginning to emerge as a potential true weapon there in that offense. They've got some young receivers and tight ends. We've seen, Kobe Fleener and Dwayne Allen both emerge as the other gets injured, and a lot of things go through some of those weapons Andrew Luck's got. He's got, as you said, perhaps an overabundance of guys to dish that ball to.
That's right. And, a lot of it is, again, through the air. Of course, T.Y. Hilton's having a fantastic year. He's already over 1,000 yards, and he's done so well as a big play guy that you forget about, Reggie Wayne. I mean, Reggie Wayne's this very consistent, more of a possession guy compared to T.Y. Hilton these days. And then Kobe Fleener's really done well, especially the last couple weeks. Of course, Luck and Fleener played together in Stanford, and then Dante Moncrief, their rookie wide receiver, is really coming on. In fact, he's really fast, and he's pretty much relegated Hakeem Nicks even to the bench. This is not a guy who's over the hill. He's only 26, coming off some great years with the Giants, and Nixon's having a hard time even getting onto the field. So that's why I talk about an overabundance. And it's interesting about Boom Herron. A lot of people would be, cheering for him as far as, the success that he's had, but, he probably wouldn't even be getting this opportunity if it weren't for Ahmad Bradshaw going down for the year. Yeah. And, of course, Trent Richardson obviously has a chance to, be the man. They really gave him this opportunity, and he's really struggled, although he is their leading rusher. He's only getting 3.3 yards a carry, and in his limited time, Boom Herron's carrying about 5 yards a carry.
And that's just it with Richardson. I've admitted that, I gave him a chance here, and I liked his style coming out of college. I just couldn't believe that you take a running back that high. But I remember LG and I just being stunned when that went down. Like, what? Of all the scenarios, we did not think, because you don't take them there in the draft. You just don't. I don't know, man. I thought it was written in the Bible of drafts, but we do a lot of things in the draft over the years that you just don't do in the draft. So that being said, though, his time in Indianapolis has been no different than his time here as far as you nailed it, that 3.3 yard average. I mean, that is the definition of he is who we thought he is. I mean, that is Trent Richardson to a man. I say it all the time jokingly, man. He's very effective if you need a couple of yards. You need more than that, he'll still get you those same couple of yards. But Bradshaw going down hurt. Boom Herron getting a chance here. They like the explosiveness late in the season. It's a rookie still, but interesting to see him. Yeah, you went through all of those weapons, and to mention a guy like Hakeem Nicks being, so far down the list of weapons there. I mean, really, that's the one thing that worries me. I mean, more than anything else. I don't fear anybody in that rushing attack there because and as we said, the Browns have beefed up defensively lately. They've been able to force turnovers, but as good as the defensive backfield has played, that is a lot of people to keep track of. Hilton, Wayne, Fleener, Moncrief, and on and on. As you said, then now here's Hakeem Nicks, so there's veterans out there, there's young speedsters out there. It's going to be a lot of work for the Browns to corral that offense to the Colts here this weekend.
That's right. And when you look at the schedule at the beginning of the year, you would see, December 7th against the Colts. You think, man, this would be a great day for it to snow a lot.
Sure
and,
would.
really grind things down and make it a freezing cold game. Not, of course, Indianapolis playing indoors usually, and, maybe make it just a bad day for anybody to even think about throwing the ball. Then that could be the great equalizer. But no, the weather's going to be, clear. It's supposed to be about 37, but, that really would have helped us to, make it hard to throw the ball through the snow. But, boy, it's not going to be the case. So, Luck's going to have a lot of stuff going for him. And, we talked about Trent Richardson. He's really putting a lot of pressure on himself. He even admits it. He's saying he's very emotional about this. I thought the Browns would be the only team that I play for. And I can't wait to get out there and show them that I'm still the guy that they took with the number 3 pick in the draft. So I think that Richardson's really kind of getting in his own head a lot about this. He's really had enough trouble, all throughout the season, let alone, going up against the Browns. I mean, I kind of don't see this working out well for him. So hopefully it'll work out for the Browns. But it's interesting because we look at, what do we see everything that the Colts bring to the table, and they've won, not only the 8-4, they lost their first 2 games, so they're actually 8-2 in their last 10 games. So what I did was I looked and saw, well, who's beaten them in the 2 games they lost were to the Steelers, 51-34, and the Patriots, 42-20. So it's like, well, what happened that caused these guys to beat the Colts? And for the Steelers, Ben Roethlisberger threw 6 touchdowns, and then for the Pats, Jonas Gray ran for 4 touchdowns. So the question is, if the Browns were to try to replicate that, which of those scenarios do you see happening? Do you see Hoyer throwing 5 or 6 touchdowns, or do you see the Browns maybe with West and Crowell combining for 3 or 4 touchdowns on the ground? And I think it's the latter that's the more likely scenario. And I think that if the Browns are going to go after the Colts, I think establishing the running game is the best way to do it.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you. That's going to be big, and that's why the news of Crowell toughing it out and whatever he's going to be able to contribute is big because, I'm not even going to overstate the fumble. That's a whole nother aspect of it with West. But you're going to a guy, and I am intrigued. I'm not going to lie. I've said this. I said I don't want to see Winston because that means that we're getting deep down on the depth chart. But I'm not afraid to see him either. I'm curious to see because he is he's very similar style to the two guys that we've got. And so I think we may have yet another potential back there, but I'd like to see that. So I'm not necessarily afraid of that, but man, obviously whatever you can get out of Crow and West, that would be great because I agree with everything you said there. You have to, number one, you have to cut time off of this game. The less time on the clock, the less offensive possessions for the Colts, the less they can air the ball out, the less touchdown passes by Andrew Luck, as we've seen. And I've watched a couple of their games in length here this season. When they get locked on, they have the ability to move it and move it quickly down the field. I mean, big chunks. The Browns like to use that term, chunk plays, but Andrew Luck, he's efficient, he's effective, but I have noticed too that he does have a tendency to make some mistakes. And you know what, for all the criticism, we live in a bubble here, and don't anybody run off and say J-Rock's comparing Hoyer and Luck, but I'm just saying, for all the criticism we see and go, man, who would have made that throw? I've personally seen a couple of interceptions that Luck threw this year. He is one of my favorite quarterbacks, so understand what I'm saying here, guys. But I've seen a couple where you just go, wow, really? He threw that? No, because it's just one of those, brain lapse moments that guys have. So for everybody that thinks that, when they look at Hoyer, people, who would have thrown that? Honestly, I really have seen great quarterbacks do that too. Luck specifically this year. So the Browns, with all the turnovers and being ball hawking, they will get opportunities because the more you throw the ball, the more opportunities the defense gets to make plays as well. And as we said, they've got a good bunch of turnovers in the last month, looking to keep that going. They're going to get their opportunities.
Yeah, and the one thing that maybe plays into the Browns' favor here is since Hoyer has had so much trouble throwing interceptions. The Colts are not a very good team as far as interceptions go. They've only had 9 picks the entire year, and 7 of those 9 picks are from guys who might not be on the field. Of course, we talk about Mike Adams, and he's got 4 of those picks. He's been hurt, and also Vontae Davis. I think he had a concussion. He has 3 of those picks, so there's a chance that both of those guys might not be out there. So they might not have almost anybody who's even intercepted 1 pass this year. So hopefully that'll help Hoyer a little bit just to get his feet under him and get him throwing the ball to the right colored jersey, to keep things moving. Because but ultimately it's going to be, I think, the Browns' ability to run the ball. Because just with all the problems that Hoyer has had, you don't want to ask him to win a shootout one-on-one with Luck. You need to give Hoyer all the help you can get to combat Luck.
No, absolutely. I agree with that. And as JK said earlier, the key is he cannot exasperate the situation. He can't turn the ball over, being Brian Hoyer. He can't shoot himself in the foot because this game is going to be difficult enough with all hands on deck and everybody on a level playing field here. You know what I mean? You can't give anything more to them. So good news here, by the way, talking about those injuries here. While Barnage, if I was leaning one way or the other, it would be he is not going to play. As much as he's talking tough, I can read between the lines of what Coach Pettines is saying, and they're describing this injury more serious than Gary Barnage is describing his own injury. So I don't think he plays, which means you may be down to tight ends 3 and 4. I don't think that's as big of a deal as some people think. Jim Dre can play. Now, I don't know about Taylor at all, but Jim Dre can play. He's a competent backup. I really said all along, remember in camp when guys thought he wouldn't even make the team, I'm like, do you even know who he is? Because he was a good piece for the He was a good piece for the Cardinals. But anyways, I don't worry about tight end so much. But Crowell says he is ready to go. He said, I don't care. I'm going to play and get out there. That's going to be a big deal. Also, you're talking about those weapons on offense for the Colts. Carlos Dansby, I'm thinking that he may play this game, which is amazing because they're talking 4 to 6 weeks. Mike Pettines said that this week. He goes, that's what you get out of a guy like Dansby. We knew that when we told him 4 to 6 weeks, he would be back in 3, and he's looking like he may be on target to be back in 3 weeks. And quick quickly getting away from the scouting report, I keep going back to win or lose, a different mentality in the locker room for finally, after all this time, when normally guys are cashing in the chips and starting their vacations at the beginning, getting a head start on Christmas shopping if they're injured on December 5th. You know what I mean?